Hello and welcome to the ActualTech Media Storage Flash and NVMe MegaCast event. We have an amazing lineup of presenters on today's event. I'm excited to be joined by Cohesity, Western Digital, and Nutanix. Before we jump into it, we've got a little bit of housekeeping here that we need to cover. First off, prizes. We will talk about prizes here in just a moment. This is a MegaCast, and we have some mega prizes on today's event. I'll be sharing with you how to be eligible for those prize drawings. Second thing here, poll questions. You know how to post in the questions and answers box there if you have technical questions during the event, if you're dealing with a storage challenge or you're curious about how a particular storage solution works, or software-defined storage, or cloud storage, or data protection of that storage, feel free to ask any of those types of questions in the questions box there, and we will have dedicated Q&A sessions after the end of each of our 3 presentations on today's event. We want this to be a really educational event. That's why we at ActualTech Media created the MegaCast and EcoCast event series to help educate the world of IT professionals about the most innovative, the latest and greatest enterprise technology solutions, and help you do it quickly and efficiently all in one place on a single event. You never have to leave your couch or office, whatever it might be. So we want this to be educational. I'll also ask you a few poll questions throughout the event, just like we did in the event warm-up. We also want this to be a social event. In fact, you can tweet about the event directly from the console right there using the Twitter icon on the bottom of the screen. I'll be monitoring Twitter throughout the event, and I will mention the hashtag here in just a moment, but that hashtag is StorageMegaCast. If you want to tweet about the event, we would love to help you do that. If you use the Twitter icon in the bottom of the console there, the hashtag will be automatically appended, so that makes it easy. And then resources. In the handouts tab there in your audience console, next to questions and answers, you'll see a list of handouts from each of our presenters. There is a handout there actually from Cohesity, a PDF. Make sure you check that out. Then one from Western Digital, and there's a link that Nutanix has provided for more information. After that, you'll see a link there to follow ActualTech Media on LinkedIn, and you can click on that as well. And feel free to follow us, and we've been doing a lot recently on LinkedIn. If you don't see the handouts tab, actually I can make it move like that to draw your attention to it. Some cool new features here of the console, so make sure you check out those handouts. And now when it comes to prizes, we have, wait, is this right? Could it be right? 5 iPhone XS's we're giving away today. That is pretty awesome. But then it doesn't surprise me because this is a MegaCast, and that's the kind of stuff we do. So yes, it is 5 iPhone XS's in your choice of color. You get to pick the color. This is a 64 gig model, and we'll be giving out one of those after the first 2 presenters, and then 3 at the end of the 3rd presenter on today's event. We'll also be giving out an Amazon $500 gift card after every presentation. Now, to be eligible for the prize drawings, you must be present on the live event. I'm sorry if you're watching this event on demand. The drawings have already occurred. Grand prize winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to ActualTech Media. It's not our rule. It's the rule of the IRS, sorry. Prize winners will be contacted via email after the event. The full prize terms and conditions are there in the handouts tab. If you scroll to the bottom, it says ATM prize terms. So if you're interested, make sure you check that out. Now, through the MegaCast and EcoCast event series, we have donated thousands of dollars over the years to charity, thanks to generous attendees who say, you know what, I already have a phone, I don't need a new phone, and they say, I'd like to help someone less fortunate, and because of that generosity, we have helped them donate to the selected charities that you see on the screen here. So if you'd like to do that, if you win a prize, we would love to help you do that as well. Now, the hashtag for today's event is StorageMegaCast, and I'll be tweeting about the event on Twitter. I hope that you do too. You can follow ActualTech Media at ActualTech Media on Twitter, and I am at David M. Davis over there on the Twitter social media network. You can also follow ActualTech Media on YouTube, Facebook, and then we have a podcast called the 10 on Tech Podcast. And I, again, recommend that you check us out on LinkedIn, and you can do that in the Handouts tab. All right, now before we jump into it with our first presenter, I want to do a little bit of level setting when it comes to the state of storage in most IT organizations today. We at ActualTech Media, we do a lot of surveys. I speak at a lot of events. I talk to a lot of IT professionals, and I don't think I've talked to anyone out there who isn't dealing with some kind of storage challenge. I mean, even on our home networks, in our lab environments, on our laptop computers even, we're all dealing with storage challenges. And that's because we have massively growing data sets, just like our company. And if you're responsible for storage at your company, I know that you are faced with a lot of these challenges because we all have massively growing data. We have more latency sensitive applications. We have aging storage systems. We have more and more data that we need to keep over time. The expectation is just that data will be available infinitely, right? Like our data center is the cloud, and it has infinite storage capacity. At the same time, we have data security concerns, right? We have the threat of ransomware and data breaches all the time. So we have to protect our data. And at the same time, that data is being distributed across mobile devices, laptops, it's out in the cloud, it's in SaaS applications. And our company expects us just to have all of this data continuously available all the time. So we have these super high expectations. We have growing data, we have distributed data, we have latency sensitive applications. And so we need some solutions for these challenges. And I know all of us are looking for solutions. That's, I'm sure, why you're here on today's event. And thankfully, there have been tremendous innovations in the world of enterprise storage of late. We have storage systems that are massively scalable, petabytes and petabytes of data, incredible performance with Flash and with NVMe, and cloud data services where we can archive that data off or use cloud-based disaster recovery, things like that. And then at the same time, there are hyperconvergence options where we can perhaps eliminate a legacy storage array and converge all that data into our compute servers and distribute that data across and perhaps gain some high availability and other advanced storage features along with that. So we have a lot of options when it comes to storage. And one of those options is NVMe. NVMe is a really cool storage innovation of late, but I bet a lot of folks out there in the audience might not be quite sure exactly what NVMe is. So I've got a few slides here before we kick it off with our first presenter, just to kind of give you an overview of what NVMe is and how it works, what makes it unique. So NVMe stands for Non-Volatile Memory Express, and it's really a communications interface and protocol designed exclusively for solid-state storage. So it's not a type of drive specifically, it's an interface and a protocol. And it offers much lower latency to the storage. It uses PCIe bus technology and offers incredible performance. And I think you'll hear about a number of NVMe solutions on today's event. So what it does is it actually increases the queue depth here. So traditional SAS and SATA queues were single queues, and the queue depth with SAS was 254 IOs, and SATA was just 32. But with NVMe, we're talking about a massive increase, and the benefit is going to be tremendous for your data and for the performance of your data. And what's great about NVMe is that solid-state disks don't suffer from the same limitations, and they can handle multiple simultaneous reads and writes, and that's what NVMe is able to do. So they can support more than one command queue, and their speed means they can process things so much faster. So moving from 32 and 256 IOs in the queue, NVMe supports 65,000 command queues and up to 65,000 commands in each of those queues. So we're talking incredible performance, and NVMe at the same time reduces the command set to reduce the load on the host. So your host will actually get better performance if they're using NVMe storage because they require less CPU to do it. Now, recently at ActualTech Media, we did a survey of our audience, and we broke it down between the folks who had direct experience with NVMe and the people who are aware of NVMe, but they didn't have direct experience with it. Now, for those who had direct experience, 53% said they felt that NVMe was going to have a major positive impact on storage performance, and 40% said it would have a moderate impact. For those who were aware of it, they felt that 61% said it was going to have at least a moderate impact on storage performance. So IT professionals such as yourselves are excited about the potential of NVMe storage and what it can do for their applications and provide them higher performance in the data center. So that's my quick overview on NVMe and the state of enterprise storage. I know you all are suffering from many storage challenges, and that's why I'm really excited about today's event, because I think we've got some really awesome storage solutions today. You'll hear from Cohesity, from Western Digital, and from Nutanix. And with that, I'm excited to introduce our first presenter on today's Storage MegaCast event. That is Teresa Miller, Principal Technologist at Cohesity. Teresa, are you there?
I am. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Teresa. Thanks for being on again. Take it away.
Yeah, my pleasure. So let's go ahead here. Why isn't it advancing for me? Oh, there we go. Okay. So as you mentioned, my name's Teresa Miller. I'm a Principal Technologist with Cohesity. And I'm actually going to talk today about one of the top-level problems that he introduced when he first started talking about storage. And that is the data consumption that we're dealing with in our enterprises and personal lives day in and day out. Now, from a Cohesity perspective, of course, I'm going to focus on the enterprise piece of that. Interesting fact, and I was actually, when that came up, I was thinking about this. On average, globally, we are generating 50,000 gig of data per second. That is massive, massive amounts of data. And so when you translate that to the enterprise, of course, every enterprise is going to be different, but it definitely gets you thinking, how much data do you really have? Real quick, too, I'd like to just share a little bit about my background before we go into things too deeply. I have over 20 years of IT enterprise experience in the industry. I'm a Microsoft MVP, a Citrix CTP, and a VMware V expert. So as we start working through this today, too, I welcome your questions. Please make sure you add them to our questions channel. If we don't get to answer them during the session today, I'm happy to take them offline and respond. All right, so let's go ahead. I think, like any of you, when I was sitting in the enterprise shoes, I wanted to understand a little bit more about a company before I heard about their product, because you want to know who you're dealing with. So a little bit about us. Our mission is to redefine secondary apps and data. We were founded in 2013 by Mohit Aaron, who was one of the co-founders of Nutanix and was the lead on the Google file system. We've been growing exponentially year over year, and we have some pretty top-tier investors as well, which you can see listed here. And then over on the right, some of our customers we have that trust us to help them out, some pretty significant ones for your reference. And then the last little bit about us as a company, we are definitely sitting in the award-winning technology category, and we were CNBC's Disruptor this year. We've been recognized by Gartner, among many others. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump in. IT as a whole is limited by our primitive data infrastructure. So let me start by talking a little bit about my enterprise experience with data. So I have a long history of infrastructure deployments that consume large quantities of data, from Microsoft Exchange on-prem to Citrix and VDI deployments. SharePoint deployments are another one. Those were huge consumers of data and storage. And every year we would sit down and try to figure out from a secondary data and application perspective, whether that was archiving or backup, even our disaster recovery and test dev environments, how were we going to manage that storage? And so it was a process ongoing every year, and it was never perfect. It was really hard to predict. And so what we're seeing, and I think some of that inability to predict came from the fact that the systems that we were using were inefficient. I had multiple vendors to work with. For example, my archive vendor was different than my backup and recovery vendor, and my test dev strategy was completely different as well. That made the systems very slow to respond, also leaving us exposed to risk, low visibility into our regulated data. If I have 5 different systems to look at to find out where all my information is sitting on that storage, it does leave a big window of risk. And actually, that's a true fact about the 5 vendors for data management. The average company has 5 different solutions that have storage that is stored on. And that can make things very, very difficult to manage and creates low productivity. And then my final thought too here on the test dev environments, I know I personally was maintaining those separate from production. In some enterprises, we even went as far as segregating the network and spinning up a completely siloed environment with its own storage and infrastructure to manage that. So fragmentation as a whole, which we're going to talk more about here, is this mass data fragmentation of all of this information that gets put on your storage, is a big issue. IT departments sometimes work in silos, so maybe archiving for Exchange is different than the different solution than what the team is using for archiving of files. And so there's that consideration. And then within a team, there can even be silos in terms of where data is stored. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about some of these causes in greater depth. So backup and recovery, when you're functioning in silos, causes data loss risk, right? If you haven't set the correct retention policies, maybe you have slow recovery, something to consider. When it comes to files and objects and servers, I mean, we have all different kinds of storages here. You might have NAS, SAN, appliances, direct attached storage, file servers, file shares. It's the optimization is low. It can be very expensive. And get this, the average number of times that a data copy of a certain file is stored is 6 times. So think about that when you're trying to predict out your storage plans for the year. 6 copies of the same file, and you probably really didn't need every single one of them. From an archiving perspective, I alluded to this a little bit already, but for me personally, when I think back to how I've had to deal with archiving, in the early days of archiving, I kind of had 2 options. One, I know some of the larger vendors had like these giant hardware units full of storage that I could buy, that I could archive all my data to, and then I could expand it out on shelves in my data center and add another unit when I had consumed that. So that was one option. A lot of those were more secure because they had worm options for making sure that data didn't go anywhere. Some of the other options that I had looked at were just as simple as an application running on a file server with a SQL backend. But of course, there were security risks with that unless you had made the choice to do actually a physically worm-based storage. So anyways, those are some of the considerations in the archiving space. And then today, again, it really comes down to how you're going to do costing, how much you want to save, and ensuring that retrieval is fast. From a test and development perspective, we talked about how some organizations actually stand up different environments for this. And you've got the storage, the copies, policies, servers. You have this whole different environment to manage, and it causes for slow process. And again, more copies of your data. Something I thought was interesting to share with you is 50% of organizations will maintain 3 or more test dev environments. And think about that. Is that you? Do you maintain that many separate environments for test dev? And then search and analytics. So if you think about all of these different systems that you have in your environment today, all on different storage, potentially even in different locations. If you're a global organization, you might even have data around the world. Do you have a single search and analytic tool that can help you understand all of that data? I'm pretty sure the answer is no. Again, in my experiences, there really wasn't something like that we could use. And so that is another consideration as you move into the future in terms of how you manage your data. So now let's consider how fragmentation can worsen actually with cloud adoption. I'm actually going to pull both of these here up on screen. So one of the last enterprises that I worked in, I witnessed this firsthand, and it was a challenge to figure out how to work through, and it was a process. I think every organization will have process improvement, but essentially the on-prem data centers had the backup solution down. Minus actually having a solution in this case that helped with the deduplication and compression to eliminate the copies. Things were pretty good on-prem. But then the cloud started peeking its way into the planning. And of course, this varied depending on the team. And honestly, actually 2 of the 3 clouds that you see here were being deployed in that organization. So not only did you have your on-prem data centers, you had 2 different clouds being managed by different teams. Now the solution in that particular enterprise's data center did not back up cloud. So what was happening is that from the cloud solution perspective is either backups were being done manually because nothing had been purchased to manage it, or backups weren't done at all. And so there's that. But then the fragmentation piece, right? There's copies of some of the data that was on-prem up in cloud because it was up there for development. Search and analytics. There was no cohesive way to do search and analytics across the environment. So it really caused and posed some significant challenges. Another thing to be thinking about, a statistic I feel is worth sharing, is 85% of users actually will store redundant copies of their data in the cloud. So it's almost as if the cloud is being used intentionally, for duplicate data. And for me, I think test dev when I hear that statistic, but 85% of users, that's pretty significant. Perhaps that's even solutions for file sharing, right? You would have multiple copies if you had a OneDrive or a Dropbox out there and you have versioning on. So again, I think we're all guilty of this. We have multiple copies of our data in the cloud. The other thing that you should be thinking about is data management storage needs as a whole are expected to increase by 36% by the end of this year. So, and that goes back to the statistic I mentioned in the beginning. 50,000 gig of data per second is what's being generated. So I think it's really easy to quantify a 36% increase in storage needs. So keep that in mind. One final thing on this, I'm going to introduce Cohesity and how it can help out. Essentially, if you implement the Cohesity data platform, we actually can take care of a lot of the issues that I've discussed today. In fact, all of them. So we do data protection. We have awareness of your files and objects. So when you're doing backup and recovery, we're not storing multiple copies of that data. We're looking out, we're deduplicating and compressing and managing your data in a way that it's not going to consume large amounts of storage. In fact, our customers, depending on the data, see significant reduction in storage needs within their solution, their Cohesity solution. We also do the archiving. We also can help with test dev, and we can also do search and analytics, so you have great insights into your data. This slide I really like to show because it's at the top, you're going to see something called the Cohesity Helios. If you have multiple installs of Cohesity, we can bring it all together with Helios. So let me explain. First of all, we do have an offering, an appliance-based one. It's hyper-converged. That is the C2000 series, and that can be installed on-prem. That could spin up into the console you'd see with Helios. We have virtual editions that also all visible from one console through Helios, and we have cloud editions of the product. And so we can take wherever you have our solution, we can bring it all together into one console. So it helps with spanning across all of those different data islands that we discussed today, which helps with your productivity. We're completely hybrid cloud ready, and we can actually lower your TCO by 50 to 80%. One other use case I'd like to highlight that I think is pretty cool. We talked about test dev environments and the needs for spinning those up and the extra storage that it takes in the planning. We have a solution that will actually take one of your on-prem servers, whether it's virtual or on our hyper-converged offering, and we can spin that up in any of the clouds you see here. And let's say, for example, you wanted to, let's say that was a SQL server and you wanted to update it to test it out before you did it to that live server on-prem, but you didn't want to go out and buy hardware for it. You could spin that up into the cloud, you could do your test, and you could tear it down with minimal costs. You didn't have to go out and buy some hardware to do that. Really, really simple way to make that happen and save some money. So essentially, we have the architecture to solve your mass data fragmentation issues. We have a Google-like web scale platform. So when you have our solution leverage or doing backups, archiving, disaster recovery on any of the environments on-prem or in the cloud, you'll get that information back quickly because of that Google-like search, because everything is indexed, which really, really helps. One other thing, when it comes to simplicity, one of our customers I actually had the opportunity to speak with at one of our conferences earlier this year, brings in interns and decided to test out the ease of use with our product on that person. Literally handed them our installation guide, not one that they had done, handed them our guide, actually not the install, I'm sorry, the use. So it was already installed. They were going to learn how to do a recovery. And with no training, our documentation, this high school student figured things out in less than an hour and had the system restored and online. So it's it's pretty simple and straightforward to figure out. In terms of instant mass restore, that's up here. I've been in some pretty sticky situations where I've had twice in my career where hundreds of servers were impacted, essentially destroyed for two different reasons. One was automation scripting overwriting servers with desktops, and the other one was a massive hardware failure because of a bad set of disks on-prem in the SAN solution that we had. And having the ability to do instant mass restore of that data was invaluable. Being able to get those systems back online, the critical ones anyways, before the workday started was so important to the business. And then the last thing I want to call out on this slide at the bottom here is the SpanFS piece. So this is a major component of, what I would consider our secret sauce, right? Our distributed file system is why we are able to do the deduplication and compression we do. For example, the indexing that we do that we've talked about, allowing for snapshots and clones to be infinitely kept if that's truly needed, and our ability to deal with and manage SMB and NFS and S3 protocols is also very important. Now there's just a couple other, actually just one more. I think overall we've really covered much of this. The Helios component up at the top I think is the big one. Helios is our centralized single pane of glass that we discussed already, tying into all of the other components that we offer. So essentially we offer what we consider to be a clean sheet approach to an old problem. Our solution is efficient. We break down those silos for all of that data management that we talked about, bringing everything into one single pane of glass. And that's important for so many reasons, right? For you as an admin doing your job efficiently, for the director level who wants to make sure that their employees are as efficient as possible and that they could turn over the solution to an intern and have them be able to do the job well. Your security teams are going to care about security and compliance, making sure that your data is regulated and kept according to your organization's legal requirements. But then the ability to restore your information in minutes, for example, because you have the right settings in place for your recovery. So we have a solution that manages and handles and helps you with all of those things. So quick summary, quick recap, will help consolidate your enterprise data. As I mentioned, we do have a hyper-converged solution, and we do have a virtual edition as well as cloud editions that can help with that. Giving you, regardless of how many of those different editions you have, you get one global unified view across your data, no matter where it lives. We keep things simple and really help generate value and help you gain a good understanding of that data you have, so that when it comes to storage planning for your backups and archiving and disaster recovery, also your test dev environments, you know what's in front of you. So with that kind of wraps up my presentation. So if there's any questions that we could maybe jump into, David?
Yeah, absolutely, Teresa. So while we answer those questions, I'm just going to pop up this poll question for the audience that says, what additional information would you like about the Cohesity solution? And this is a multi-select question here, so you can select multiple responses. So feel free to do that, and we'll just leave that up, and I appreciate everyone answering that. Let's see, first question that came in here, they're asking about, is Cohesity sold as hardware or software? I know you mentioned the cloud edition. So how does the hardware fit into that?
Yeah, so it really comes down to your environment and your needs. So let's say today you are primarily an on-premises deployment. You have the choice of doing our hyperconverged physical appliance or our virtual edition. Now, that being said, you, from the on-prem Cohesity, still have the ability to do some of that cloud backup. We have integrations where you would present your, let's say your Azure tenant or Google or AWS tenant. You can actually pull that in and back that data up. The consideration there becomes the RPOs and RTOs in terms of how fast you can get that data back up to the cloud. So what we sometimes find is that customers would want the on-prem for their on-prem, and that they might want our cloud edition, which actually installs right into whichever cloud you're managing. So that could be Azure, AWS, or Google, and then that might help with your RTOs and RPOs. But again, we have Helios, so you can still get a single pane of glass into that information. So essentially, it really comes down to your corporate needs, but and it would really come down to a conversation so that we could understand your needs to make sure we help you map out the best deployment for you.
Okay, it makes sense. So another question here, how does Helios store my enterprise data?
Yeah, so Helios will keep track of the information across those different Cohesity installs just by use of metadata. So there's nothing actually really compliance-wise being stored. I know, so sometimes that question comes up because of GDPR. It really is just metadata, so there's nothing specific to your data that's being kept there.
Okay, got it. And another question came in, they're asking, is Helios a separately licensed product?
So I believe we include it, but you know what I would like to do is just double check. I think that comes with Data Protect. Can we flag that? And I will 100% confirm.
Absolutely, yeah. And then another question, Raj here is asking, what's the licensing model overall with Cohesity?
Yeah, so we are primarily consumption-based. So it's about the storage you use. So if, for example, if you buy the on-prem hyperconverged solution, it'll be sized out. So let's say it's like a 42 terabyte Cohesity, you'd be paying for the storage. From the cloud perspective, it's about consumption. So, and then there's a storage calculation that we use. So it's always about the storage and the consumption.
Okay. And do you see, another question actually, Frank is asking, does Cohesity store primary data or is it just secondary data?
So we do not run any primary workloads. So let me explain that a little bit further, because once in a while I'll get in a conversation about primary versus secondary, and I think it's important to understand the difference. And I think the question is actually really great. So when I think of primary data, I think that that's where my virtualization deployment is installed. For example, maybe that's where I have my Hyper-V or VMware environment deployed, and I might be running my full-blown primary servers there. The secondary data that we're talking about here, or secondary workloads, are specific to certain things. So it would be backups, archiving, disaster recovery, and those can be servers. But it's never going to run your primary server or primary data center servers on it. So that's kind of the difference. Mm-hmm.
And do you see, is Cohesity replacing existing data protection solutions?
Absolutely. And I'm not going to go into details on vendors, but we are seeing that where some backup vendors specifically companies want more out of their backup solution, and we do more, right? We're not just backups. We can make sure that you have disaster recovery, that you are archiving that data. We do data lock too, so data lock is worm. So if you have specific data that needs to stay because of regulatory compliance needs or for legal hold purposes, we help with that too. And a lot of the proprietary backup solutions that, from days of old don't do all of those things. So in some cases, yes, we're absolutely replacing those.
Nice. So a lot of different use cases: disaster recovery, data protection, storing data with worm, and
archiving.
Archiving, yeah, very nice. Okay. Let's see. Another question: Does your solution offer high availability for patching and upgrades?
So absolutely, our deployment is highly available, and that's a great question too, because I didn't really get to talk about that today. So it's designed that way. You have enough nodes in your environment to make sure that you can do all the patching you need to. Absolutely.
Okay. And let's see, last question we probably have time for here in the live session. I want to get to this one because I think it's good. Michael's asking, does Cohesity work with most storage vendors? So when you're protecting the data, what are the requirements for the source of that data?
Oh, so I just want to make sure I understand the context of the question, and I think I do. So we can back up, I believe, so if I understand the question correctly, you're saying, well, if I have EMC storage or HPE storage or Dell storage, can you back that up? And the answer is yes. And then the other piece to that is, and I didn't get to mention, we do have partnerships now with HPE and Cisco. So if your environment is, let's say, HPE or Cisco only, which I know personally I've run into that. I've worked in enterprises where you stick with one vendor for your hardware. We actually can run on certain models within those vendor platforms. And let's see, Cisco Live and the HPE conference are both coming up, and I know there's going to be more in the headlines about how we're doing that because they're pretty new partnerships. So those are coming. Let's see. Any new announcements on that will be coming out in the next couple weeks, because I think one of those is next week already, if I'm not mistaken. So. Awesome.
So if it's in the data center, most likely you all can protect it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've not run into anything we couldn't from a storage platform perspective.
Excellent. Well, I think that's all the time we have in our live Q&A session here, Teresa, but there's some more technical questions I saved for you there in the queue. If you can get back to those, I'm sure the audience would appreciate it. We got lots of comments about your great presentation, so thank you so much for being on the event today.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. I'll follow up on the questions. Have a good day.
All right. You too. For more information, visit cohesity.com. Also, check out the handout that's available for download there in your audience console. And now it's time to announce our first set of prize winners. We have a $500 Amazon gift card going out to Dang B from Utah, DANGBUI from Utah. Congratulations. And our first iPhone grand prize is going to Jason Contreras from Arizona. Congratulations, Jason Contreras from Arizona. Got a lot more prizes to give away, so make sure you stay tuned. And I'm now excited to introduce our next presenter on today's event. That is Mr. Stefan Vervat, Senior Director of Partner Alliances for Data Center Systems at Western Digital. Stefan, are you on?
Good morning. Hi,
Good
David.
morning. Thanks for being on. Take it away.
Welcome from San Francisco. Good afternoon, or good morning, good evening. Today, Western Digital is selling multiple storage solutions. And today what I would like to address here is quite an overview on our products regarding Flash, NVMe, and our systems and platforms. For those who don't know, Western Digital has a wide range of products. I'm responsible for solutions and alliances within the data center business unit. So what I would like to address today is a little bit more detail on NVMe. David did a great job in setting the stage, so I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail what that means for your applications in the data center and how you can apply it. So at the end, we'll talk a little bit more about how solutions can, or how our customers are deploying NVMe in their workloads in the data center. We'll talk a little bit more about the top challenges and what the needs are that we see in the field that can be addressed with NVMe as a whole. Okay, so at Western Digital, and I think this is not new, we believe it's all about data. Even though we are a storage company, we are actually looking at ourselves as a data company as well. And so we believe that we need to help our customers with whatever is possible to monetize and make them more competitive with those data assets. And that comes from, you know, an angle of protection or analytics or, accelerating your applications, et cetera. But as a whole, Western Digital provides pretty much anything from an HDD to a flash to the market. And the typical question I'm getting on a regular basis is disk dead, right? Is disk going to be replaced with flash? It's very common to get that question. The answer is absolutely no. Today, the HDD business that we have, because we have the majority stake in HDD, we have, I think, 45% or so of the market. There's still a tremendous amount of value and a differentiator of 8.8x between SSDs and enterprise HDDs when it comes to dollars per gigabyte. So what is changing? Well, the interface is changing. As David said in the beginning, NVMe is a new protocol that allows you to actually access your data and directly on the drive and take advantage of those newer media technologies like NVMe, Flash-enabled NVMe media systems, and actually, bring those value props back to your applications. So the interface is transitioning, and it's even to that point where we believe that, and we've made sort of like a prediction that in 2020, we believe that SATA, this traditional SATA interface, will be replaced with NVMe. And actually, it's happening right now. It's happening in the field and in the market. And we see that NVMe today is moving from sort of like an early adopter stage to an early majority stage. So it's right at this cusp. So the time is now to take advantage of it. Now, the way you consume it, of course, is important because what is really NVMe? Well, it's a new protocol, as David mentioned. It provides you direct access to the storage, and it gives you a lot more throughput because the way it's designed. And not only that, it's designed to be able to handle multiple parallel, queues and applications. So it's a perfect fit for environments that are consolidated, where you have a lot of applications accessing the same data, the same storage infrastructure. But the challenge in a lot of cases is that, the file systems are not designed for it. And so even though it has these higher PCIe bandwidths and it takes advantage of, this new protocol that gives you higher throughput and higher IOPS for the same density, the challenge is still, how do you deploy this and how do you bring this to your application, your environment? So there's different ways to do that. Obviously, we want, from Western Digital's perspective, we are always looking at providing our technologies, our media in different form factors to our customers. So one of them is an all-flash array. So for those who don't know, but we've been selling all-flash arrays under the IntelliFlash brand for the last 2 years. So at Western Digital, we have a systems business unit, which I represent, and there we sell anything from a JBOD to a fully integrated all-flash array. And today we have 100% NVMe all-flash array available, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But really, the benefits there are that you have a fully integrated stack that delivers you lower latency, lower TCO, more consolidation capabilities, and you don't really have to worry too much about how to unlock those capabilities and what type of file system and what type of configuration you want to deploy with these NVMEs, because we have already done that work for you. Now, when you look at our customer base, right, the applications that benefit directly from this tier one storage, because that's really what it is, are specifically low latency applications. We have customers in finance that are very focused on the latency and the volume of transactions they can process in a microsecond. They've written their own applications, their own business applications. They're very focused on real-time analytics. Every second matters, right? Or every microsecond matters. So they're very sensitive to, the impact of latency, and they're also the first ones to look at, these types of technologies because it gives them an edge to be more competitive. Second, are the virtual applications, virtual environments, very common because that's where you have a lot of applications consolidated in a single platform, and it's typically, a continuous challenge, right, for customers to, add more of these virtual applications into the same stack. And of course, databases, we today work with SQL, Oracle, SAP, now also SAP HANA, very common, very typical environments that will benefit from these low latencies and high performance. And then, with these new workloads that are coming up, specifically machine learning, deep learning, we're actually seeing an interest there as well. And just in general, we ourselves, Western Digital, don't forget, we manufacture millions of drives a week. We do a lot of analytics ourselves. We are one of the largest Amazon users too when it comes to bursting our analytics into the cloud. So for us, finding that right balance of NVMe on-prem and doing that in a hybrid way is really important for our analytics internally. Now, what are some of the top challenges, right? That I think most of you already have experience with this, or unfortunately experience with it. But typically, customers when they come to us, they tell us that they are looking at increasing their transaction speed because it has direct impact on their customer experience, or they are looking at accelerating their backup capabilities because the application's done, or the quiescing of the VMs is affecting directly their applications and affecting directly their business, and therefore, they can't do backups during the day. So it's a very common, challenge. So the combination of our NVMe products with, snapshot capabilities, which I'll talk about in a second, can really take advantage of the NVMe all-flash array. Background processing, very common as well, right? You're running something in the background, you're doing garbage collection. It depends depends on the application. But, there's a lot of background processing that just gets, that gets lost, and that still has a lot of impact on a tier one storage as well. Now, the fourth one, it's kind of common, right? You have typically a lot of silos of storage are being deployed, and today there's a lot of consolidation happening. What I'll show you in a little bit is how we have seen customers find the right balance between an NVMe infrastructure and an HDD cloud-based infrastructure. So really where it comes down to is finding sort of like that right balance between the high-end NVMe tier one storage and then tier off or move data off to a more cost-efficient and more robust scale-out object storage that is HDD-based. So when we look at the business drivers, it's obvious to see that, performance is one of the major business drivers to adopting NVMe. In general, customers are looking for more IOPS. And if you look at the HDD business, right, that we've been running for so long, we've done a tremendous good job in bringing more capacity per density, per platter over time, and we're very consistent in that. But from an IOPS perspective, we sort of like stay the same or haven't really increased as much. So this is where your NVMe product comes in. And again, it gives you the higher throughput because of the PCIe lanes. It gives you, actually to give you an example, with NVMe, you could get, just twice the transfer speed than with a traditional SATA drive, right? So, it's already obvious, you get twice the performance and then you get all the other benefits. Now, second to that, the second business driver is workload consolidation, right? Every time you upgrade your infrastructure, you'll be looking at what can I consolidate, how can I optimize my traditional infrastructure? Can I move from a fiber channel to Ethernet? Can I move from an SSD to an NVMe, or can I move from an HDD? Because still a lot of customers have traditional SAN infrastructure with our HDD drives in it. Can I just sort of like upgrade completely the infrastructure to an NVMe and then have some sort of a cloud repository behind it? And that's really what we're seeing. Actually, we're seeing a lot of flash to cloud deployments, and I'll have some examples at the end. But really, it comes down to lower power and cooling, reduced floor space. We have a lot of customers that are running out of space in their data centers, and so they're constantly trying to optimize that. And that's where flash is a good solution in general, because you have lower power utilization. Number three is, and this is where a lot of the newer workloads are being deployed and are driving sort of the need for NVMe, is in real-time analytics, as I said, and those new deep learning, machine learning workloads that sort of put pressure on the traditional storage architecture because they work completely differently. And so there's some first reference models or reference architectures that we've built out with some of the ecosystem partners, because at Western Digital, we're very focused on the ecosystem. We believe that our storage products should be integrated with as many ecosystem partners as possible, so that you as a customer can choose where to put the right product and the right solution and plug it into your Veeam, your Rubrik, your NetBackup, etc. So for us, we're very focused on how can we improve the business outcomes of our customers, because that's where we have seen the value ourselves too in our data centers. Today, we do analytics on every log that comes back from the drives that are returned back to us. So we're doing a lot of analytics ourselves, and it's sort of like feed into our product management that creates these products. So let me give you a quick overview on some examples on how we've implemented or how our customers are implementing NVMe. So I'll be focusing on the IntelliFlash. So as I mentioned before, we have an all-flash NVMe array. Obviously, we also sell NVMe drives, right? But if you look at the data center and the enterprise environment, the easiest route to implement an NVMe-based solution and take advantage of these performance and cost efficiencies is really to deploy an all-flash NVMe array. And we believe that the all-flash NVMe arrays will, over time, take over the traditional all-flash arrays, because today already we see 50% lower latency with an all NVMe flash array versus a traditional all flash array that is SAS based. So you already get 50% lower latency, you get 30% lower TCO, and you get twice as much capacity to consolidate, or you can consolidate twice as many VMs and applications on the same platform. So lots of savings by just moving to this NVMe platform. Now, what does that mean for your infrastructure, right? What type of applications? And as I mentioned in the beginning, databases is a very common workload that could benefit directly from an all-flash NVMe. Now, when we look at our customers, a lot of our customers actually run their databases in a virtual stack. So it becomes a combination of, hypervisor plus, an Oracle, SQL. Now we're seeing SAP HANA. We're certified with SAP HANA. We have performance numbers if you're interested in SQL and Oracle. We can share that with you offline if you're interested in that. So all of these applications, we test them very thoroughly in our lab because it's important for us to demonstrate how much more of a performance increase and cost efficiency you get. Now, if you look at databases in particular, this is from a real test from a real environment here. We see as low as 200 microseconds in latency with our IntelliFlash N series. Now, what I'm showing you here is the portfolio of Western Digital, because we believe that, obviously the NVMe product line is still, for first of all, you get more performance, but it's also a little bit more expensive. Now, the sweet spot here is that you could combine the IntelliFlash Hybrids stack, which is has a combination of HDD and SAS SSDs as sort of your secondary copy or your secondary tier. And if you really want to expand your capacity, you can do that with even our JBODs that are HDD based and our scale-out object store that scales into multiple hundreds of petabytes. So typically, a customer environment will find a balance between an NVMe-based tier and a scale-out object tier, or somewhere in between to cover their secondary storage and their tertiary storage. Now, the NVMe solutions here will bring you up to 36% lower TCO, and again, that comes out of lower lower footprint, lower licensing costs because you're consolidating more servers and more VMs. And we also have direct integration with some of the ISVs. As I mentioned, we are a big ecosystem player, so we believe in working with all the backup vendors, the data movers, Oracle, SQL, SAP HANA, so that it's really vetted and certified before you roll it into your environment. And so it's a combination of the full system and the snapshot capabilities that we have, because IntelliFlash itself has cloning capabilities, inline deduplication, compression, all the tools and whistles that you need. We have a support. We have an IntelliCare system that automatically tracks telemetry data, and we measure it and monitor it for you. So there's a lot of services that come with IntelliFlash as a product. Now, when you look at data protection here as well, what we're seeing is sort of like this flash to clouds architecture, where customers are looking at implementing IntelliFlash as tier one, and then they can take advantage of the snapshot capability either directly integrated to some of the backup vendors, and that will reduce the impact on the application stunning, and then that will help you to create your backups during the day, not just at night. Or we work with Rubrics and the Veritas, et cetera, and Spectrum Protect to tier off data into a more cost-efficient either HDD IntelliFlash-based system, or if you're really looking at multi-petabytes, then it becomes more valuable to go with a scale-out object store that really consolidates your secondary storage and your tertiary storage in a more robust tier. Now, this will increase your RPOs and RTOs because you can restore from snapshots on tier one, and you can still recover from a secondary backup. And this is all managed through the same interface. So the IntelliFlash stack, one of the key differentiators with other solutions out there is that you have a hybrid model. So you can have an N series all NVMe based, and you can have a hybrid model that essentially is your secondary copy, but that's still managed in the same way and through the same interface. And then you have obviously by combining flash and clouds, right, you're sort of like optimizing your total dollar per terabyte significantly, because the ActiveScale cloud storage stack that we have doesn't store multiple copies. It stores a single erasure-coded copy, and it's fully redundant across data centers. So it's typically deployed in a 3GO environment, and customers don't need to replicate any data because everything is immediate, consistent. So it sort of offloads your, those older backups for archive purposes, right, or longer retention. They are managed now by the ActiveScale product line. Now, the last solution or the last workload that we'd like to talk about a little bit is our analytics and machine learning in general. So we have different solutions there. Typically what we see is Splunk is a very common workload that can take advantage of the IntelliFlash N series because it will optimize your indexers. Your indexers will run faster. Splunk also has now a new software stack that is optimized for flash and cloud. So you can actually now optimize in the past they had a 3-tiered architecture, and they consolidate their architecture to a 2-tiered architecture, which is great. Now customers can take advantage of NVMe, accelerate their indexers, and then automatically offload long-term retention to cloud. where our object store fits in. And then on the Hadoop side, we also have a direct connection with Hadoop. So for traditional big data analytics workloads, we see adoption of NVMe drives within the Hadoop nodes itself, and the S3A allows you to just tier off again the data to our object store, and so you can really find the best of breed here, where you have just enough NVMe to run your analytics and really store the data really fast in a more cost-efficient scale-out architecture. Because in those cases, we're talking about petabytes of capacity. And then on the machine learning, where data gets trained and models get optimized, we see newer software stacks, again, the ecosystem we work with, that enables and leverages our NVMe drives in a storage server, and then offloads data here as well into an ActuScale. So again, what we're seeing as a whole is an adoption of flash to cloud. And cloud could be an on-premises ActuScale cloud, or it could be a public cloud. So all of these exist or coexist together. So with that in mind, so we only have 1 minute left, sorry. If you have any more questions, please let me know, because we at Western Digital, we're very vested in the enterprise and systems business. We exist for more than 50 years. We've been around for a very long time. We are the manufacturers of HDD, and now with our SanDisk acquisition, also flash. And we are continuously leading the revolution or evolution of NVMe, and we make that available in all our products that you've seen here today and moving forward. So with that, I'll open it to some questions. All right,
yeah,
so
great.
question. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, David.
Well, before you start reviewing those, let me pop up this poll question for the audience. The question on the screen says, what additional information would you like about the Western Digital solution? And so I'll just leave that up while we do some Q&A. And there are a ton of questions that came in. I've been assigning these to you, Stefan. So if you want to, I can go through some of these, but if there's some that you want to kind of cherry pick that look like they would be good questions, feel free. Which one catches your eye?
Yeah, so do you provide public cloud or hybrid cloud solutions? So good question, John. So obviously I've shown you multiple products here, right? So in IntelliFlash, the question just, so with ActuScale on our private cloud, we can copy data to a public cloud. So we have options to, create a policy that will then copy data into a public cloud. On the IntelliFlash, we are an on-prem solution today. We're also looking at optimizing that and see if we can adopt hybrid cloud. So it depends a little bit on the use case. So with our private cloud, we do support hybrid today. Let's see. And if you need more information, I can give you some more details there. There's content, performance numbers, etc. That we have that all available. Let me see. Can we convert existing SATA driver to NVMe? Today, no. Today, you have to start with a new infrastructure. So NVMe is really unique. So you have, you don't go through sort of the traditional HBA. So it's a different architecture. And typically, what you're seeing and what I'm seeing in our customer base is that customers have a traditional SAN infrastructure that's fiber channel. They're looking at upgrading their environment, and they realize that NVMe can give them more performance. Some customers will actually make the leap to Ethernet, and they will just completely not just upgrade their storage infrastructure, but they will upgrade their network infrastructure as well. And the reason there is because you'll get with Ethernet, these days it's cheaper, and you can get a 100 gig Ethernet switch pretty easily. I mean, it's not that expensive anymore. And there's a lot more applications that are now communicating over Ethernet, and so does NVMe. So, typically the conversation we have leads to a bigger conversation than just storage. And we're seeing that it's driven by different, like I mentioned, right, different projects. It could be a machine learning project comes in with the storage admin, and they're looking at how to support this, and it just has so many different requirements that they just completely create a new architecture for it and a new network infrastructure for it. There's a lot of questions here. Just so you know, I will follow up on every technical question. I promise. I know we're running a little bit out of time, but we'll definitely take time to follow up with you over email. How much more expensive are NVMe drives over similar capacity and SSD? Thank you, Henry. I expected that question. It depends because, first of all, it depends how you consume it. What's interesting is that, you're seeing the same trend as with HDDs. So if you look back at, 15 years ago, right, you saw this whole proliferation of high capacity enterprise HDD and high performance HDD. And we're now consolidating, and we're very public about that, right? We're consolidating some of these, profiles on the enterprise HDD. Now, what I mean is that on the NVMe side, you're seeing we are creating different profiles as well. So we have anything from an NVMe that's really designed for high write, high read. We now have new drives that are very optimized for just high read. If you, let's say, have VDI workloads, we can support that at a much lower cost. So the answer is it depends, not just on the workload, but also on the type of NVMe we deploy for that workload. So there's a lot of detail behind that. But for our IntelliFlash all NVMe array, the TCO we give back to our customers is 30%. Now the incremental cost is going to be higher. I don't know the final numbers because I don't want to share any numbers here, but I'll follow up with an example on what an N series would be and an all flash array would be, because that's probably the closest apples to apples that we can give to you. But just in general, what you'll see from Western Digital 2 is more options for a customer to choose from when it comes to NVMe. Let's see, does Western Digital have an ROI tool to show the savings? Yes, we do. We will follow up with you, Michael. That's a really good question. What's the interface for the NVMe all-flash array? Good question, Ken. That's today we have fiber channels. So we have block and file. And we are primarily focused on applications. So we're not going after scale-up NAS or opportunities. We're really focused on applications, virtual, like Oracle, SQL, virtual environments, SAP HANA, etc. So it's file and block, and it's over fiber channel and iSCSI.
I think we have time for just one more question.
Yes. This should be placed in existing setup or need to set up. I'm not sure. Let's see. Oops, there's new questions coming in. How much of the box tuning needs to be done for OLAP, OLTP workloads? That's a good question. I think that requires, what we'll do is we'll share with you our performance paper, because it kind of depends. For example, we've done an SAP HANA performance test. We have numbers for that. We didn't really have to tune it, but it obviously, we always want to learn more from our customers too. So let me follow up with a paper on that. And yeah, all the other questions, I'll follow up offline.
Yeah.
And then we can go from there. There's some really good ones.
Yeah, lots of good questions today. It was a really good presentation. Thank you so much, Stefan, for being on the event today.
Thank you.
For more information on Western Digital, check out the handout that's available for download right there in your audience console. It has tons of technical details on the solutions that Stefan just presented, and Stefan will do his best to get back to all these many very technical and really good questions that came in from that presentation. So thank you, everyone, for those questions. Of course, you can always visit westerndigital.com for more information on the Western Digital solution. And with that, it's time for our next prize giveaway. We have another Amazon $500 gift card going to Michael Chase from California. Congratulations, Michael Chase from California. And our second grand prize is going to Sean Sparks of Oregon. Congratulations, Sean Sparks of Oregon. And after the next presentation, we'll be giving out another gift card and 3 more grand prizes. So make sure you stay tuned for those prize drawings. And with that, I'm excited to introduce Mayank Gupta, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Nutanix. Mayank, are you with us?
Yes, I am, David.
Thanks for being on the call today. Take it away.
Thanks for the introduction, David. To the audience in the call, thank you for being here and taking the time on your morning to be on the call. So as David said, I am Mayank Gupta. I lead the product marketing for the core HCI for Nutanix. And again, you must have heard Nutanix in the context of an HCI vendor, but at the bottom there is storage. So I'm excited that what I'll be presenting today is almost a rough line on what HCI is, a quick background on what HCI is, and how the Nutanix HCI is architected in a manner so that we can take some of the advantages of the new storage medium out there, so which is very pertinent to the audience on this call. So that's how the flow of my presentation is going to be. Again, all of you are on this call is because IT today is fairly complex, right? What ends up happening is that you're managing the core data center as well as remote and branch locations. And when you have a complexity which is essentially coming from the legacy infrastructure, which is constructed with discrete silos, I'm sure you can see a lot of these names, and these names are familiar to you, right? But when I talk about this discrete silos of storage, server, virtualization, and networking, because of these silos, IT becomes very complex, and the fragmented design is difficult and time-consuming to provision, and it's very hard to use. At the same time, it has multiple failure points, which creates a very fragile system because as IT admins or storage admins or DBA admins, a lot of your time is just spent troubleshooting these tickets. So what we wanted to do is find a better solution so that the processes, instead of this never-ending process of buying, deploying, and managing, as well as we can make the processes simple, as well as give time for people to innovate, right? Now, one of the things which has consistently happened is people have decided, let's move to the cloud, right? Because it's somebody else's problem, they manage it. But what we have realized, and a lot of businesses have realized, is that public cloud itself is not just the right solution. What is needed is a balance between public cloud, which combines the suitability for elastic cloud-native applications, and a private cloud, which is on-prem, which combines the ease of use, agility, scale, and security, as well as the control of a dedicated data center. Now, a lot of businesses want that, right? Now, this is where HCI, what Nutanix offers, comes in. What we deliver is essentially bringing all the public cloud benefits, the benefits of ease of deployment, the scalability model, and we bring all those benefits to your private data center so that you get the freedom of choice of hardware and virtualization technology. Essentially, it's a software-defined way of abstracting private and public clouds into a simple operational model. So that's what we are trying to do with HCI. Now I'll go to the bottom of that HCI as well. But the fundamental problem is, as you have businesses to run, and these businesses might involve a public cloud, a private cloud, as well as a distributed edge. These would be robo locations that you might have. And what a true cloud enterprise platform must do is to abstract this infrastructure and make sure that data and services are shared across all these multiple clouds that you have in your organization. So if I was to show it in this manner, right? So only when the data and services are shared across all these environments can your stakeholders utilize these resources to develop and deploy and consume applications wherever they are. Now, I told you a lot about HCI, but is this backed by actual numbers? So here's a survey that IDC did of 651 individuals on what are businesses looking to do on the enterprise cloud. Essentially, what are the challenges that organizations want to address with HCI? And I know you can see on the slides there is improved backup and recovery, reduced capital spending, but there, in one of the reasons you also see is that move away from SAN-based solutions. So what organizations are trying to do is, how do we move away from these SANs, because they're just very hard to manage, they're hard to scale, And that is one of the fundamental premises of having an HCI solution on which Nutanix offers. Now, let's go into some of the details on what HCI brings, right? So a lot of you have seen the storage, and I think that's primarily one of the reasons we are on this call, is that you have the storage in the bottom, which is one of the layers of traditional three-tier architecture. Now, these storage spindles, they could be flash, they could be NVMe, they could be HDD, they could be even tape. Now, the fundamental problem with the three-tier architecture is that these storage devices are connected through storage controllers, which go over traditional network or even fiber channels, and then they go to the compute and the virtualization layers above. Now, as you have, if you look at this, what this involves is that you have to partner with multiple vendors. This could be the SAN vendors or the storage vendors or the networking vendors. Every time you have to deploy these architecture, which is in this form, it takes multiple weeks or even months to design, procure, and deploy such an environment. So you will have a chief storage architect, you have a chief network architect, you have a multiple specialist teams who are needed for this form of architecture. It's very difficult and time consuming to process and increase capacity, because when you increase capacity, you're almost doing a forklift of your traditional, let's say, hard drives, and then you're going to NVMe. So everything is very hard to scale. And at the end of the day, you have multiple management consoles, right? Each layer has its own management console, and it's managed and staffed by IT specialists. So what we were trying to do at Nutanix is essentially change this model. Abstract all this complexity that you see on the right-hand side and make it something simpler. And that's where we come in. Nutanix Enterprise Cloud essentially simplifies the design, construction, and deployment of IT resources. What we try to do is to converge all IT resources into a single scale-out solution that can run on any applications. Now, because it's one box, you can keep on adding more boxes, so scaling is 100% linear. As you add nodes, it adds proportionate amount of storage and server capacity. So at the end of the day, if you have to double your overall capacity on a Nutanix deployment, all you have to do is multiply your nodes by 2. There is no more guesswork. Again, because it's a 100% software solution, it will run on commercial off-the-shelf servers and commercial off-the-shelf storage. That's a huge value prop, and I'll talk a lot more about that in the coming slides when I actually go into the gory details of the storage devices, right? So here, scaling is very easy, and because it's running on non-proprietary hardware, you don't have to worry about those things. And here's the compelling industry. Also, because this is a software stack, upgrades are very easy, and you can actually do in a live environment. So you don't have to shut down and come over the weekends for your upgrade. So that's a good value prop as well. And here's a compelling industry prediction that Gartner, who's a leading industry analyst firm, has publicly predicted that the number of workloads in a typical enterprise environment that will run on an HCI solution, such as Nutanix, will go from 5% in 2017 to almost 20%, which is a 4x increase by 2020. Now, that's a huge number. Now, let's go into what is the storage and what kinds of storage are we supporting here, right? So let's talk about flash, because I know before I joined, Teresa and Stefan both talked a lot about flash and NVMe. And when we talk about all-flash arrays, right, a lot of all-flash arrays manufacturers, they're rejoicing at the inevitable demise of spinning disks. But what I'm here to contend is that HCI is increasingly upending the entire storage category. And now that's a very bold statement, but I'll spend a lot of time on this slide because it talks pretty much about all the storages and some of the bottlenecks which as storage admins you deal with in day in, day out. So I'll go slowly on the slide, but I have a compelling story here, right? Now, when all-flash arrays, they become faster and easier to manage than a traditional arrays, and there's no doubt about that. But at the end of the day, it's still a SAN, right? At the end of the day, it's still connected through those storage controllers to your network above. And what Nutanix enterprise cloud is delivering is that it creates a better platform for your flash. Now, accessing data in a traditional model from an all-flash array over a slower network negates the benefit of that all-flash array, right? So if you look at this tweet here, which says an NVMe latency is around 30 microseconds versus even running at a 40 gigabit Ethernet network, your latency is around 40 microseconds. So essentially, your network here is acting as the bottleneck, right? So putting a flash in a proprietary array at the end of a network designed for latencies around spinning disks instead of a completely does not make any intuitive sense. What it essentially boils down to simple physics, right? You have latency and you have to identify where the bottlenecks are. Now, what should ideally happen is that flash should be directly connected and not remotely attached so that it does not require multiple hops or protocols or performance constraining controllers to come in the middle. And that's what we have to do. Now, let's talk some numbers here, right? Some common types of flash, let's say the 2.5-inch pluggable drive, we see in enterprise systems, they can deliver roughly 500 megabytes of throughputs per second. Roughly that translates to 500K IOPS at lower latency. Now, what you'll realize is that only needs 2 drives to saturate a 100 gigabit Ethernet or 4 drives to saturate a 16 gigabit fiber channel network. Now, that's a problem, right? Now, luckily, we have multiple NIC ports, but that doesn't help when a storage array could have tens or even hundreds of individual drives. 12 or 24 of these drives in a single server of storage shelf. When common flash technologies today, anytime you connect to a network, you are essentially creating a performance bottleneck that cannot fully achieve the performance of the drive. Now, let's talk about NVMe, right? Which is the next generation flash technology, which is becoming very popular, which is talked about a lot in this webinar, right? Now, each of NVMe device can deliver enough throughput and IOPS to saturate a 40 gigabit Ethernet NIC. Now, this is one of the primary reasons that NVMe storage systems such as EMC, DSSD, they don't recommend using traditional network, right? Instead, what they say is that they use a lot of direct PCIe Gen 3 connections. They have realized that the network here is the major bottleneck, and it's often too slow to deliver the kind of performance that flash-based NVMe can actually deliver. Now, each individual NVMe, which can deliver, is almost 6 times to 8 times faster than traditional flash. So, how many customers are going to deploy, or how many of you are going to deploy 40 gigabit Ethernet per server in your traditional data center, right? It's a huge cost expense, and which is why we have to find a better solution. And so what I contend is that the real answer is essentially twofold. Firstly, that we need to virtualize, and secondly, we need to invest in a system architecture that is distributed in nature, right? It doesn't go through a single choke point. So, and this is where the distributed nature as well as data locality comes in. So the architecture on how you architect your data center to take advantage of flash or NVMe is very important, right? An architecture with data locality ensures that data is kept local to the application on a local server while being distributed in data protection. Now, I'll speak to that and I'll show that in images in my future slides. But I think, again, what I'm contending here is that data locality as well as distributed nature of storage protection is very important. Now, not all HCI systems today, they have the concept of data locality as a part of their architecture. So, which is very important that when as storage admins or as network admins, you have to be very careful about the vendors that you choose. You should evaluate each vendor with regards to your requirements as well as your business needs, and look at what is needed to protect your environment, right? Now, let's go to some of these details, right? Let me quickly walk you through how Nutanix is able to take advantage of a distributed nature. So what we start off is essentially a block storage, which is what we call a standalone node. As I already showed you, that standalone node already has a server, a CPU, and storage inside it. And it also has the underlying networking built into it. And once we have one of these nodes, we can linearly add these nodes. The essential value proposition here is that each node has a controller VM running on top of it. And what that CVM does is that as and when you add these nodes to your storage pool, they make it seem that it's an endless pool of storage. So now, as you add more and more storage, you can linearly scale as you are adding nodes to your infrastructure. So as I said, it appears as a single storage pool. On top of it, we are running virtual machines. And now, on top of that is your hypervisor, which we run. Now, because of this data center, modern data center, your applications which are running on the top will see storage as an endless pool, and the CVM will ensure that as and when applications are running, they see data locality, so that local data is very fast and accessible to them, versus there are copies of data that is spread across multiple nodes, so that if something goes wrong, we can immediately bring those nodes again. So this is again a picture of that thing. Like I said, your storage could be a flash, it could be an NVMe device, or it could be a storage spindle. But at the end of the day, the CVM ensures that everything seems as a seamless pool of storage, and your hypervisor and your CVMs are running on top. Now, I want to talk about resiliency as well. What we also do is, at the same time, we make sure that all the data is encrypted at rest, so security is also important. Now, let's talk about resiliency, and this is an important feature which a lot of storage admins can have run into problems, or when storage, one of these disk drives goes down, you have to immediately bring things up. And what we do at Nutanix is we deliver resiliency out of the box. So let me tell you how we do that, right? The key point about Nutanix self-healing or resiliency is the fact that we are not constrained by traditional RAIDs. Right? Here's an example of a five-node cluster which has RF2. So what's going to happen is, if you look at the first node, which is the node on the left-hand side, we have a VM running, and what I'm showing by ABC, these are data blocks which, let's say, your applications are accessing. What we also ensure is that the copies of this data is distributed across several nodes. So you see A, B, C are copies of this data which has been spread across the node. But for data locality and quick access, so again, going back to that bottleneck, what we do is that copies of data are local to that node on which the applications are running. So things run very fast. So I'll talk about some IOPS numbers later, but what data locality ensures is that things are running in a very fast manner. Now let's say your node goes down. Like, let's say a disk goes bad, somebody accidentally plugs out a power cord. What would immediately happen is, because we have a CVM running, the CVM will immediately move the VM to the next node. It already has a copy of the data, and immediately what it will start to do, it will start to build copies of the data on other nodes. So now you can see A, B, C are being copied on other nodes, as well as, because we want to maintain data locality, copies would be made back to that node locally. So what this ensures is that your copies are again local, and we have again made copies of the local data on your on the other nodes. And this all happens in the background. So what this form of architecture ensures is that you never go down, because the moment something goes down, you can immediately be running, and you always have data to access. And that is a huge plus to maintain resiliency. Now, let's say this other node goes down, right? Because you have an RF2. Again, what's going to happen is we'll repeat the same process all over again. Your VM moves to the other node, and we'll again copy the data from other nodes for data locality, so that you have very quick IOPS. And then what ends up happening is we make copies on other nodes. So again, going back to when I said having a right architecture can fundamentally improve the performance of your network, so that you're not playing that cat and mouse game of network and storage all the time. The good thing that we have done in Nutanix is that this resiliency is not just at node level. We offer this resiliency even at block level as well as rack level. So that's a huge plus for any storage or a network admin. Now let's talk about some flash and some of the key points, right? So one of the things we have realized is that data and its scale of data is just perpetually increasing. People need more and more data, right? So again, at Nutanix, what we offer is a density advantage where you can get a 96 terabyte of storage in a single node. That is a 2U node. So essentially in a 2U pizza box, you're getting 96 terabyte of nodes. So that's fairly dense. That's an all-flash node. So you can get a lot of density in a 2U node. So that really helps you. The other thing which I want to highlight is that a lot of all-flash arrays, such as Pure or something, they utilize proprietary hardware. Now the problem with proprietary hardware we have seen with Sun or Violin, right, that it's a roadblock to quickly deploying new hardware innovations. Now all-flash arrays risk technological leaps that leave customers with obsolete products and almost leave them with no choice but to do a forklift upgrade the next time they need more capacity. And that's not what you want to do as your storage admin, right? In today's fast-paced environment, what is important is that companies who leverage global economies of scale by using commercial commodity hardware, they are the ones who are likely to succeed. So it's very important that your HCI solution or your storage solution doesn't tie you down to something which is proprietary, right? Now, HCI business is hardly the one example of a thriving enterprise technology built on commodity hardwares. All leading cloud providers, they also use commodity servers, and that is the key to go, right? Because proprietary hardware, while once essential to protect a company's innovation, now it might hinder or even destroy your ability to scale for future, right? As I already talked about the distributed storage controller, you don't want to have a single choke point, right? This is why an HCI, which Nutanix offers, because we don't use a distributed storage controller, we are much more scalable. Now, most AFAs have physical non-distributed storage that are essentially easily saturated with traffic. And because the controllers are the bottleneck and not the SSDs, we want to change that. Now, if you contrast that with Nutanix, every time you add a node to a cluster, we are also adding a virtual storage controller, enabling immediate enhancement of performance, so as well as resiliency, right? So this is a massive improvement over a single controller architecture that you would have faced earlier. Similarly, the other bullet point here is data locality. Because we keep data local, as I showed you earlier, we can always get a very good throughput. Similarly, with scalability, as I showed you, scalability with Nutanix, unlike AFA, it's not bottlenecked by two physical storage controllers. And the VMs on every node, they are serviced by a controller VM, as I showed you in the diagram earlier, so that every time a node is added to the cluster, a CVM is also added, and thereby you get a linear scaling, not just in capacity, but also in performance. So that's a huge plus for people. Now, I think one of the things which a lot of people should be concerned about is what kind of workloads are we running on this? Like, are these fast workloads, or these are like some, I think the general perception out there is, are these just easy workloads like VDI? And I'm almost at the lagging and towards the end of my presentation, I want to go into these workloads and give you some tangible numbers so that you can actually benchmark, right? So what we do is that Nutanix gives compute access directly to storage, such that servicing requests with limited while limiting the overheads and gives you a lower latency, right? So I'll talk about some of these workloads which are very important, right? So again, and what we're also doing is, as new storage mediums are coming, we're trying to take advantage of these new storage mediums. So I talked about data locality. So data locality has been a key tenet of Nutanix architecture, as you already saw in the slides that I showed you, right? In the distributed system, serving data to applications without going over the network is a big advantage. And in 5.10, which is the release which happened last October, we introduced a fundamental change to the architecture, which divided the metadata into two parts. It's not just the data that your applications are using, but even the metadata. And this is what we call the autonomous extent store. And the goal behind this overhaul was to keep relevant metadata for application data local. This meant lower network utilization in order to serve applications. It also freed up CPU cycles because there are no inter-service process communications now. Now, the overall impact, and I'll show that in the later slides, is that we lower the TCO for the data centers, as well as increasing reliability. So what we have seen is we have reduced the on-disk writes by up to 40%. We have reduced the network utilization by up to 75%, and we have reduced the CPU utilization. So let's talk some numbers here. So this is with our latest architecture, and what I'm showing here is essentially a simulation of a 1 terabyte of data restore. And what we are showing is that with the new architecture, a 1 terabyte database can be restored. Previously, when it was being restored with roughly 500 Mbps or in a time matter of 50 minutes, now we can do that in just 24 minutes. So again, that's a huge improvement, and it just shows that today's HCI with the right architecture are capable of much higher IOPS and much higher latencies. Sorry, much lower latencies, right? Now let's also talk about some applications, right? In a perfect world, we would care about a lot of applications, but what we have done at Nutanix is we have decided that we will conquer the most challenging applications, and once we do that, a lot of other things will automatically fall in place, right? So SAP HANA, so Nutanix is the only HCI vendor out there which is certified to work with SAP HANA. But we didn't stop there. Some of the EHR applications such as Epic and Meditech, their database have one of the most stringent requirements. And what we have done is that we have actually certified our system to work on that. So let's jump in one of those examples. Let's take Meditech. What is Meditech? It's essentially an EHR electronic health record management tool. It's called Meditech, and it's required for life-critical, the reason it's so stringent is because it's used for life-critical applications. Now, let's talk about some of the numbers which comes with Meditech, right? So what are the requirements? You need a sub-millisecond write and sub-2 millisecond reads forever. So you have to show that consistency forever. We need a streaming 512K backup per node, and they're also very CPU and CPU scheduling sensitive. So it has to be very CPU scheduling as well, sensitive as well. Now, what we were able to do is with the improvements and the way we are architected, we were able to meet all the requirements on Meditech. So let me show you some examples on what we were able to do. And not just Meditech, even one of the databases such as Epic, we were able to meet the requirements on that. So essentially both these applications have two kinds of databases. One is the Epic Cache and the other is Epic Cogito. And both of them require extreme low latencies. The IOPS are 100% random, and because of these, what we have to do is we had to really make sure that the architecture was taking advantages of NVMe flash, as well as making sure that we were taking advantages of data locality so that we were able to meet the stringent requirements of these applications. Now let me give you some numbers. So the final performance metric that we were able to achieve with NVMe on an SSD is that over multiple 40 gigabit Ethernets, we had a peak write throughput of 2.4 gigabits per second, and that was sustained. So these were peak writes of 2.4 gigabits per second, as well as 100 gigabit per second of reads with write latencies of 3 milliseconds. Now, and this is what we were able to do through an HCI vendor. So again, going back to people thinking that they need specialized SANs and RAIDs, no, we have shown that with the right architecture and modern storage, we can actually take care, we can actually deliver very in state-of-the-art industry numbers. So essentially, to summarize, what an HCI can do is can solve the challenges of SAN and NAS, and you don't have to be constrained by your legacy architecture. And again, I must stress that not all HCIs are created equal, and HCIs that take advantage of distributed storage fabric as well as data locality, they are almost a must for scalability, performance, as well as resiliency. And finally, the right HCI solution combined with the modern storage such as NVMe and Flash, they can enable today's workloads such as SAP HANA or Epic databases or Meditech databases. So you need all of those to make a system which is actually future-proof and can scale accordingly. So that's what I had. I'm open to questions now.
Yeah, great presentation, Mayank. Thank you very much. While we do some Q&A, I'm going to pop up this poll question.
Mm-hmm.
And it just says, what additional information would you like about the Nutanix solution? So I'll just leave that up there for the audience to answer. Let's see, first question that came in, Raj is asking about what sort of resource reservations are needed on each node for the CVM?
So the CVM itself is, if you look at 100, let's just take 100 gigabyte, right? So the CVM itself uses a very low memory. I think it's in the range of a few percent. So we want to make sure that most of the resources are used by the application. So the CVM itself is fairly light. And also because it's spread out, we can minimize the resources that are used by the CVM. But that's a good question because people think, I don't want to run the CVM and let it eat all my resources. So yeah.
Right. Okay, good. Another question Raj had here is there a different Nutanix license per node when you're doing all flash versus traditional spinning disk?
No, it's not. So I think what all flash offers is essentially much denser nodes, but we don't necessarily discriminate by that. Usually the way we are licensed is per CPU core, and it's not gated by spinning disks versus all flash.
Okay.
So you are welcome to choose whichever technology you want and whichever you can whichever you're comfortable with.
Very nice. Yeah, I like that. Okay, Shiva is asking here, you had mentioned that Nutanix is able to reduce overhead. Can you explain exactly how that works?
So what is when I mean overhead is so for example, to give you the case in what we did in the latest re-architecturing, what we did is whenever you have, so the way we keep data locality, as I showed you, we keep copies of the data local so that you don't have to go over the network to access data. Once you have copies of the data local, because you're minimizing those IHOPs to other nodes or your access to the storage, obviously that overhead is gone. The other way of minimizing overheads, which we are trying to do in the latest incarnation, is earlier, because if you recall in that diagram that I showed, is that we keep copies of data on multiple nodes for resiliency, so that something goes down, we can quickly bring up data. But in order to know that, we also kept a metadata layer. And what that metadata layer is that it had some information about the data that was stored over the network, as well as some information about the applications running. And now with the latest architecture of the Nutanix AES, what we have done is that we have tried to make sure that even we are intelligently minimizing that metadata locality, so that even the overheads of going over the network and understanding, hey, which piece of data is kept where, is also minimized, so that we only are aware of what applications are running and what is this data needed to use that. So by architecting things so that things don't have to go over the network over and over again, you can reduce overhead, and that's what we focus almost exclusively on. We have a great focus on that, and that reduces overhead, and that's why we can get very high IOPS to meet the standards of SAP HANA or Meditech or Cohesity.
Excellent, excellent. This next question here, John is asking, how about comparing TCO to public cloud solutions? What have you seen when customers do that sort of comparison?
So again, that's a good point, right? And I think as I alluded to earlier, right? Sometimes you need the public cloud when you have unpredictable workloads, things which come in bursts. Then you cannot immediately scale your data center. But again and again, and I don't have to quote myself on this because obviously you'll say this is biased, but you can look at IDC and Gartner numbers for workloads which are predictable. The on-prem data center is always comes out a winner, and which is the reason a lot of businesses still have on-prem data centers, right? When you have to deliver security and latency, and you have a predictable workload, then on-prem data center wins. Yes, when there are bursts, I think it is imperative that you go to clouds, and those numbers win. But essentially, at the end of the day, which is why we have smart IT admins who do the analysis on how you break that workload and make the right combination between the cloud as well as the private data center.
Yeah, excellent point. In fact, I just did a webinar last week with the VP of Customer Success there at Nutanix, and who's known as ROI Dude on Twitter, about that specific topic, calculating ROI between Nutanix and public cloud. And so it's a great resource. In fact, he's got a book out published by Nutanix on the ROI story of Nutanix. So maybe we can point John to that resource as well. Let's see, another question. Yeah, another question here. When you talk about the different Nutanix nodes, can you give us some kind of idea about like what's the smallest, like the entry level node, and then how does it scale up from there?
Right. So So right now you can actually. So the way, let's say, a 2U pizza box is structured is there are 4 nodes in each of them, and I think each node is 12 terabytes right now. So you get 48 terabytes of raw capacity. On the flash nodes, each of these nodes is 24 terabytes. So you get roughly 96 terabytes of storage in a 2U node. So that's 96 terabytes of raw capacity. Now, because we have storage admins on the call, usually if you are running an RF2, that 96 would become half because now you want resiliency. But with dedupe and compression, what we have noticed is we usually multiply it by 2.5x. So roughly you get back that 100 terabytes. So a 2U node can give you 100 terabyte of storage, which is fairly dense, right? And now you can add as many of these in a rack. So essentially you can grow in a form of 100 terabytes and grow up. Now that being said, you can go to the Nutanix website. We have a combination of compute heavy and storage heavy nodes. So what I was alluding to earlier was storage heavy nodes. So 100 terabytes on a 2U form factor, but we have compute heavy nodes where the storage is little, and there are much beefier Intel processors in there so that you can use the compute on those sites.
Okay, excellent. Well, I think that's all the time we have for questions in our live session here. There's some more technical questions I assigned to you there in the queue, but a really great presentation. Thank you so much for being on the event today, Mayank.
Thank you, David.
For more
Send me the questions and we'll answer to them. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll do that. For more information on the Nutanix solution, check out the link that's there in your Handouts tab. Of course, also visit Nutanix.com. And with that, it's time for our final prize giveaway on today's event. We have an Amazon $500 gift card going out to Mike McTeague from Massachusetts. Congratulations, Mike McTeague. We have 3 iPhones, 3 grand prizes going out to one to each of these individuals. So Roger Demari from Texas. Congratulations, Roger Demari. Paul Stropko from Massachusetts. Congratulations, Paul Stropko. And Zach Molson from Washington. Congratulations to all the winners on today's event. If you aren't one of today's winners, no worries. We have a lot of events coming up at our website, events.actualtechmedia.com, and there's a lot more opportunities to win. Before you go, I want to remind you about our 10 on Tech podcast over in the iTunes store. You can subscribe and listen to that. If you're a potential sponsor of one of the ActualTech Media events, MegaCast, EcoCast, and webinars, just email connect@actualtechmedia.com, and we would love to chat about potentially presenting on one of these events. Next week, same time, same day, we will have an EcoCast event, and it's called Solutions for State and Local Government and Education EcoCast. So for those of you in the event vertical poll question, you said you work at a state, a local government, higher education, K-12 organization, this special event is for you next Wednesday, June 12th at noon Eastern Time. So we hope that you'll join us for that event. Watch your email inbox for an invitation. If you don't have one, just go to events.actualtechmedia.com and you can register there. Thank you, everyone, for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us on today's event. I really appreciate your support. Thank you so much again, and have a great day.